hardship is so easy to fall into, but joy is also really easy to find. My name is Brienne. I go mostly by Bree, and I am a two-time cancer survivor.
Welcome to our show. And so, how did you find out that you have the leukemia? I think it's called the acute myeloid leukemia. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Yes. So my story to diagnosis was a little difficult. It was my senior year of high school, so I was 17 years old, and I was my first day of my senior year. I actually came to school feeling really sick, and I left early that day. Went to urgent care, and they ended up telling me and my parents that I had a strep throat infection, which was fairly common for me. But after that, it didn't really get better. Instead, it got a lot worse. I ended up over the next 2 or 3 months going to urgent care 7 or 8 times,
Okay.
and just progressively started to feel really awful. I was struggling, just walking short distances. That we ended up going to a different urgent care out of town, and we got the blood results the next day, and they told us to go to the ER. They took me to the ICU as quickly as possible, and the next day they told me that I had leukemia.
Ah, okay. What happened after the doctor discovered that you do have AML? Did they check you in immediately? Then your treatment started right away? Can you share with us what the treatment looks like?
So my treatment began even before they actually found out I had AML. So when I was in the ICU and the doctor came in, he told me it was most definitely leukemia. They went ahead the next day and they did surgery to place a central line in my chest, which is kind of like an IV, but it's more permanent. And then they also did a bone marrow biopsy. They did a spinal tap to see if it was in the spinal fluid. And then they did some other tests as well. You're in the hospital until your counts recover. We found out a few days later that it was AML, which my doctor said suspected. And they went through that treatment. So that treatment was over 30 days in the hospital, with a lot of complications. And then I would go home for a week, and then they would kind of rinse and repeat. And the days of chemotherapy were between about 6 or 10 days, and then usually about 30 days in the hospital just recovering.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere else I have seen people who went through chemotherapy. There were a lot of side effects. Could you share some of that? What was it like?
The side effects I struggled with the most were like nausea and vomiting symptoms, and something called mucositis. It's basically like little sores that
Mm,
cover your mouth, and
okay.
it can cover your intestinal tract.
Mm,
And I had those a lot. So I was on pretty hefty painkillers, and there
yeah.
were times when I couldn't eat or drink because of that. And then sometimes I just didn't have an appetite. So I was on IV nutrition a lot. And then I did get a few infections.
Mm,
My second round of chemotherapy, I got something called H. pylori, which just causes like a lot of nausea, vomiting,
all right.
and other symptoms.
Mm.
And then my last round, I ended up getting a superbug, which sent me into septic shock.
I have seen on some of your post or some write up regarding to you have some pretty awesome team of doctors and nurses. They even, I believe, celebrated some special event in your life, even though you were in the hospital receiving treatment. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yes. So my nurses and my doctors were my rock when I was going through treatment. I had incredible parents that were with me 24/7. And I had friends that would come and visit sometimes. But really, I mean, when you're in the hospital for days and days and days, the people you're around the most is the nurses, and my nurses and my doctors were so incredible. They would play card games with me when I was so bored.
Mm,
When you're in a hospital room or even just around a ward, there's not much to do. So you get really
Mm,
bored. So sometimes I'd be bored almost to tears, and they'd sit with me and play a card game or something, and they
wow.
kept my mental stamina up during a lot of it. And when I
Yeah.
did go the last round, when I went to septic shock, I had been really excited because we had planned for me to go to my prom. Um, and even at one point after I went into shock, it was about a week before my prom that I got back on the unit because I did have to go to ICU. So I had gotten back on the unit and they had talked about giving me a day pass to go to prom, but I ended up getting another fever um,
Mm,
the Wednesday before prom. It was supposed to be on a Saturday.
right.
So they ended up just a bunch of my nurses and my amazing child life specialists. They ended up planning prom for me on
Wow.
the floor. So they took the infusion room and they used like the oxygen to blow up balloons, and um, they created a really really special memory for me. And honestly, I think it was
Yeah.
better than going to actual prom. It was
Yeah.
a really really incredible moment for me.
It is amazing to hear that the healthcare taker that watch over you, not only are they professional knowing at their trades, but they will have the love and the capacity to take the time really to become your second family in some of your most vulnerable times. So that's great to see that there are good people around us like that. Now, I'm kind of curious, now what went through your mind as you going through the treatment? Um, what was your outlook on life at that moment?
When I was first diagnosed, I was so sick that nothing would have surprised me if that doctor had said, I don't think.
Okay.
So I remember when him coming in, he asked me how I was taking it so well. And I was just sitting there like, well, I'm here. And that's
Mm,
kind of how it was for the
okay.
first two rounds. I think I was so just sick that I wanted to just feel better. But then kind of the isolation really set in when I was sick, wasn't as sick, and I wanted to do things, and I was feeling really lonely. But really, it was my nurses and my family that just
Mm,
it felt like this was just my new normal. Every day just had to be another day, and
yeah.
I really just couldn't think about my surroundings. I just really kind of tried to enjoy everything that I got to enjoy.
Yeah, you're sort of living the moment because you don't know what's going to come next, and you eventually did reach your first remission. This is after how long of treatment?
So I started treatment in November,
Okay,
and then ended in May. So it
May.
was about 6 or 7 months of treatment.
So you could see a gradual improvement over time, or you able to
Yes.
see that. Does that bring some encouragement to you as well when you see some positive results?
After the first round, I didn't go into remission. I was in near remission, but I didn't, and we were still struggling with the cancer in my spine.
Okay.
And so after the second round, when I finally did get into remission, it was actually kind of discouraging me. The initial thought was this should have already
Mm,
with AML. It's really about getting rid of it as fast as possible and then going through treatment to make sure that it stays that way.
it sounded like it's up and down, up and down. It's not a. There's a bit of a roller coaster ride. Maybe
And there it
that's
is.
yeah to get there, and it wasn't a kind of just coast through, and it's going to come. There's a bit of a struggle as well. Um, so, what was it like then after remission of returning back to normal the first time?
So I graduated high school about, I think, 2 weeks after I came home the last time, if it was even 2 weeks. Um, and it was just kind of like starting in this new world. Now you're an adult, but you didn't really get to go through the milestones of senior year that
Yeah,
everyone else did. So I hadn't applied to any schools. I hadn't, applied for scholarships. I hadn't really done any of the senior year things. talking with my parents, had decided that I was going to take a semester off. That summer, I spent really just focusing on myself. I
Okay.
met a lot of great people. I got to go to cancer camp.
Okay.
And then we got to go to Colorado with the cancer camp. And I did a bunch of things for myself and really felt like I was kind of finding myself again.
Yeah.
And then that fall, I applied for the spring. I went saw colleges and I decided to go closer to home. And I actually got a job that I was really, really enjoying. I started working as a 911 dispatcher. And I just kind of felt like I was finally kind of finding that footing
Mm.
of who I wanted to be as an adult.
Yeah. Okay. So I noticed, at least for your first return, some of the people you choose to spend more time with are people that you know through the cancer experience. Um, so is there a community form while you were at hospital or as a cancer patient that you build some bonds with some other people sharing similar journey?
So during my first experience, I think the oldest patient that came in was 15, but the only one I really saw much of, I think she was 12.
Mm.
So I think everyone was very much drastically younger than me in very different stages of their lives. So I actually
Mm.
connected to the parents a lot more than I was connecting
Okay,
to the children.
I see.
So I would sit and I would have full blown conversations with people's moms about what their children were going through. And I think that was part of the isolation too, was I didn't really know that many people my age, or I
Mm.
didn't, at least didn't get to really talk with them or get to know them very well. And I did have someone reach out, this girl. So during the entire first time, I was just texting her. She had been through cancer 3 times at that point. She also had
Wow.
leukemia, but she had a much rarer form than I did.
Oh,
So we would talk a lot during treatment. I think that really helped. And when I went to cancer camp, I made 2 really close friends
that's
who
good.
both had blood cancers.
Then you had a relapse, I believe, what, 6 months later after your first remission.
Yeah, it was about 6 or 7 months.
What was it like to receive that news?
It was really difficult. When we finished treatment, there was some indication that relapse was possible. We had had a small relapse scare right after I finished treatment, and that had shown that I had some minor residual disease. But as the months went on, I think your thought is less and less risk. And so when I started having symptoms of stuff, I had just started work and everything. And I was like thinking that was just me kind of stressing my body again, really like, okay, we're doing things now. And so my only really symptoms were back pain and a little bit of fatigue. So I don't think I was completely expecting it. But when I started to see the trend in my blood work, I wanted answers more than anything. I was just waiting for an answer, and it was mulling over me for about a few weeks. It didn't become real that it could be a relapse until one of my friends relapsed about 2 weeks before I found out.
Okay.
And I think those 2 weeks were probably really, really difficult because I was just sitting there waiting and waiting for news. And when we went back to the doctor to get more blood work done, did not come back good.
Mm.
They sent it off for further testing. And when I got the phone call, I knew what the phone call was and I wouldn't answer it. And they called my dad while I was just like sitting in the kitchen making a sandwich. And I overheard it.
Mm.
And I was just sitting there, just hearing his side. And I just kind of dropped the bottle. And it was really difficult to process.
Yeah.
I don't think I was really scared of a bad outcome the first time, but the second time it just felt real, like something potentially really bad could happen. And I
Mm.
hadn't really considered that as much until that moment. Um, and it was just kind of stunning. I just felt like I was in a state of disbelief.
I imagine the second time around, you understand the gravity of what this means, even from the first time. And when you came back, so the doctor decided to take a different course of action this time, right? Instead of chemotherapy.
Yeah, the protocol for AML patients when they relapse is to do chemotherapy until the patient is in remission and then do a bone marrow transplant. So we decided to go that route.
So that brings us to the organization called Gift of Life. How did you connect with them? And I think ultimately they found a donor for you. Tell us about that.
So I live in a more rural area. The treatment center I went to was not a transplant center. So when I went, I had to go 5 hours to go see a transplant specialist and go see that doctor. So when I went and saw the doctor and we had talked about transplant, they're like, okay, we're going to find you a match. So really, I mean, it's really just from the doctors. They look on something on the international registry to see if there's matches. And I was really lucky to be told that I had several matches on the registry. So from that process, during my first round, we were told, we've secured a donor. The donor is good to donate.
So the doctor knew about the registry and they processed you through it, and you didn't know what mechanism is in play to find you a donor. But later on, you did find out it was Gift of Life. Then when there is a match, what has to happen after that for the bone marrow transplant to take place?
So on my side, I had to finish chemotherapy and I had to get back in remission. And that chemotherapy was really rough on me. And then you go through a bunch of testing, you do all this to see if you're ready, and then you go through the process of getting it. But on the donor side, they are also going through testing. They're going through deciding if they want to donate. They do confirmatory typing just to see if they're a good enough match. And that's when once they do that, I think that's when we were told that I had a match. And then they do a second stage where they go in for a full exam. We ended up being told that my first match that I had was not going to donate for whatever reason. They never told us why. But then I was really lucky that I did have multiple matches. So they had found another one.
Okay.
So luckily, once we knew we did have a donor and my center had cleared me, then we went up to Atlanta and we went ahead with a transplant.
So in your mind, what went through your mind? Of course, there's probably some discouragement when you found out your first match donor not willing to donate for whatever reason. But the second one did. What went through your mind when you found out about the second one?
I think it was a lot of emotions. It was only during my first round of chemotherapy, I had a friend, the one who relapsed 2 weeks before I did. He wasn't able to find it out. And unfortunately, he likely wouldn't have made it to transplant either way. But he did get a kidney infection and he passed during that treatment. And I think when I heard that the original donor fell through, there was a lot of emotions of fear. Because I had just kind of watched someone go through that. But it was very quickly that, they had told us that you have a second match. And I think it was a lot of emotions of relief, gratitude, but also of a little guilt that I would get this gift and not only one person, but two people.
Yeah, I imagine the feeling must be fairly complex. Yeah, I had a chance to look at Tony Joe's website and story behind how he donated. He put it pretty simply. Oh, he just knock me out and do the procedure on me, and I woke up, and so he sort of downplayed the process. But knowing that you have to fly somewhere, lying on an operating room table for them to tranquilize you basically and knock you out to pull stuff from your spine.
Well, it's not from your spine.
Oh, it's not from your spine. What's it pulling from?
It's from your hip bone.
Okay, well, tell me more about the details. So, because obviously this is for future donor knowledge, okay?
Okay, so there's two types of donors. 90% are going to donate something called blood stem cells, usually for its own center, and it's kind of like a resort. They get 6 or 7 hours. I mean, it doesn't usually take that long, but I think it's 4 to 7 hours. And it's just donating platelets or plasma, where they take the blood from one arm, filter it through a machine, and return it through the other. What Tony did is a little bit more rare. It's only done about 10%, and it's usually only asked for small children. So donors that donate bone marrow like he did usually go under general anesthesia. And it doesn't really scar. You might have like a little pinpoint scar.
So it's a non-invasive procedure, and it taps into the bone marrow of your hip. Is that right? And is there any side effect for the donor afterwards?
So they typically feel like a little tired, maybe weak in that area. So they do ask, when you're donating bone marrow, not to work out too much. So there might be some hip or back pain, but typically that goes away within a few days if you experience too much of it.
Okay. So let me see if I can summarize it and correct me if I'm wrong. Again, this is to summarize for people who are thinking about donating, but a little bit afraid. You say majority of the time is more for platelets, and this is not too different than you're typically giving blood. But in the rare cases where Tony went through, it's through the hip bone, minimally invasive procedure. And is it is it an outpatient thing?
It's outpatient.
It's outpatient. So they get your bone marrow, and you kind of go to sleep a little bit, and you wake up and you're done. Take it easy for a little bit. Is there important part that I'm missing?
Not really.
Okay. Well then, that's frankly, at least for me, it takes away a lot of the fear. I do think this part of the education is important for our viewer or listener to understand. So it's not as scary, painful, but yet the outcome and the impact that this procedure can make is life-giving. It's something that people really ought to consider. Thank you for educating us on that. I know you ended up, at least after your second remission, you joined force or began to work at Gift of Life.
So after I met Tony, or while I met Tony, I got to meet some campus ambassadors and some people from Gift of Life. And I began doing some like Zoom calls. And then the next fall, I actually joined the campus ambassador program. And I've been in that program for 3 years now.
Yeah. I saw you actually made a little video for Gift of Life about your story. Was that right?
I've made a few at this point.
A few of those? Yeah, that's right. And I saw one that was very touching. But I do want to come back to a big event that you managed to allow you to finally meet your donor. I believe it's usually a no-no until both party agrees. Can you tell me about that process and how did you guys meet and what happened at the meeting?
December, I got a message from Gift of Life. And there's a lot of rules and laws surrounding donation. You actually can't meet your donor until a year after treatment. It was kind of a weird thing because they were like, we want this to happen, but we have to get special permission for it to happen because the event was a Nashville Predators game. He had consented, I had consented, but the event was actually, I think, a week before 1 year. So they had to get special permission. So we had to wait on that for a little bit.
Paperwork. Hey, by the way, just for our audience, just to make sure they understand, Predator is the mascot, right?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, no, it's the name of it's a professional hockey team in Nashville.
Hockey team, okay. So you guys met up at a hockey game.
Yes, we met at a hockey game. It was very funny. So they flew us up to Nashville. They flew me and my mom up, and my dad drove up. When we got to Nashville, that was when I got to like meet people from the Gift of Life program. I got to meet people who were in the campus ambassador program at Vanderbilt, and we just really connecting with them, I think, inspired me to really get more involved with the organization and just their mission and how everyone is. It was really a great experience. And the day of was kind of funny because we were in these t-shirts and I did an interview before and I had this t-shirt on that was like this orange shirt that said "Life Saved." And they had given me a Predators jersey in the back of it, said Gift of Life. But there was a woman with Gift of Life around me, and she was like trying to make sure that we didn't see each other with our shirts on before the meeting. Um, they did an introduction on the like big hockey
Mm.
screen. And so they did this whole introduction.
So but you knew you were you go in there to meet your donor. It just that it's the
Yes, I
anticipation of who is that in this crowd, and when is it going to happen?
yeah.
And yeah, so after you saw Tony Joe, what happened?
It was kind of a rush because no one had told me we were doing any interviews this whole day. And I already done one I wasn't prepared for. And then as we're like coming out, they like did like one on paper and it was like, cool, whatever. But then we're like, next thing I know, we're on ESPN doing an interview. And so I didn't know this guy. Like I just hugged him. Like that was it. Now we're on national television
So yeah,
doing a
so
quick
the get to know you moment is very short, right? Yeah,
yes, yes. And you know, it was kind of a rush night. We didn't really get to really do more than you know, watch the game. You know, it's so loud in a hockey stadium. You can't really get a conversation in. I got to meet some of his friends. We shared our contact information. And since I was in Nashville, we ended up we had extended our stay a little bit more and we got to go out to dinner and really
mm,
get to know each other.
okay.
We did escape room together. I think doing an escape room is a good way to get to know someone.
Escape room,
Although we
that's
did not
right.
finish.
Oh,
We did
okay.
not finish because talking so much. But once I really got to know him, it was he's an amazing person. We're still really close. We talk all the time. And we like to really celebrate milestones together.
Yeah, he
So
does seem like a really amazing person. I had a chance to look at. He's working in pharmaceutical now, and again helping
so
others.
yeah, he runs clinical trials.
Yeah. Now this is a great story, right? Because you go to a hockey game and a hug broke out, and then you get to introduce your donor. And I think it's a wonderful story of someone willing to step out their comfort zone, take the trouble to donate no bone marrow. The impact is so huge that allow you to reach your second remission. So, question is, what was the process like after bone marrow? Is it just all just wonderful from this point on?
So my bone marrow transplant was really difficult.
Okay.
I ended up getting severe complications.
Mm.
I had something called veno-occlusive disease. So basically, the veins to my liver collapsed,
Mm.
and my body just took on a ton of fluid. So that led to a lot of damage. I was in the ICU for a while. I lost a lot of memory. I also had something called acute graft-versus-host disease. So it's basically where the transplanted cells start attacking um, the recipient's body. It took me a long time to get out of the hospital, in the hospital for about 60 days post transplant. And
Okay.
then you have to stay close to the hospital for a while. So I was
Yeah.
there until day 120. And then shortly after, they found out I had something called, I had graft versus host disease, but I had the chronic version. And that affected lots of different parts of my body. That still impacts me to this day. And it was
Mm.
something that took a long time. Even today, there's a lot of damage from the chemo, from
Mm.
the transplant, along with the graft versus host disease. I also have really bad neuropathy from chemotherapy. So I really have lost a lot of mobility in my left leg. And then I have something called hemochromatosis. So I had to have a lot of blood transfusions. So your body really just holds on to the iron from those. So I have a very hard deposits of iron all over my body, my liver, and in my blood. And so I go weekly still to the oncologist to get treatment for that.
Mm. Yeah. So it's not a cakewalk, even with the transplant.
It doesn't end as easily as I think people think it does. Cancer, bone marrow transplant, or anything. I think people think once I rang the bell, that meant I was better, but it's a long process that will probably last for the rest of my life, but I'm really grateful to, you know, have these issues because it means that I am still here. So
That's definitely a very positive way of looking at life. So, just kind of share with the audience, after you went through all that, did you have some life lesson that you sort of go, yeah, I went through all of this experience, you know, this is kind of what it means to me, and this is kind of how I see the world. My worldview change, my view about people, about life in general, and how's your outlook on life? What's your? I know you're in school right now. I mean, by golly, you're sitting in a college or a classroom or a study room talking to me right now. You're engaging life right now, and not just life now, but you're preparing for the future. So tell me about that.
I think it was a really gradual process. And I think it's been a really up and down process of kind of figuring out what my experience has meant in my life, kind of discovering myself after cancer.
Okay.
I've talked to a lot of survivors, and I think survivorship is one of the hardest parts of cancer. You know, I think when you're going through it, it's very easy to kind of just get in this mindset of, you know, this is what's happening and you have to go day by day. And it's kind of this necessity to keep going. But I think it really just when, especially when, you know, I kind of laugh at the fact that, you know, I rang the bell in September 2019, and that was my doctor was like, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. You can go in public again. And then we went
Ding,
straight to
ding, ding.
COVID,
Yeah.
and it kind of had to
Yeah.
had to like go through that whole process of I was extremely immunocompromised and had to be and I was and for the entirety of 2020 I was on immunosuppressants. So I was you know, in a very vulnerable state with COVID going on. So I was incredibly isolated again. Um, but I I think there were things that just made it easier and made me start learning what the experience was. I think it was mostly like I started connecting with other cancer survivors online. You know, me and my two best friends talked a lot during the pandemic. And as I started to go on, I think, you know, I started to understand and kind of have this feeling that I wanted to give back, and getting involved with Kids of Life helped me start that process. I was doing a lot for how I felt like I needed in treatment and feeling trying to give that to other people. So I kind of took on like a mom role in my group chat. I said it because everyone calls me the group mom.
Right.
And then I decided I wanted to go back to school. That was something that, you know, I kind of felt like my relapse had taken away from me was the opportunity to get to go to school. Even my first treatment, you know, that took away my opportunity to finish my senior year of high school. So I was really just trying to get through and finish what I had wanted. So I started school back up in 2020, and it was going really well. Then 2021, actually, I lost my best friend. She passed away from complications of her treatment.
Right.
And I think that really sent me into an experience where I didn't know what I wanted. I kindly started to feel like I was finding my path, and I got really bad survivor guilt, and I felt like I had to do everything. I felt like I had to prove like why I had made it, why I had gone through with cancer, and why I had survived, and so many of my friends hadn't. Throughout 2022, I lost, I think, a total of around a dozen friends in 2022. And I just kind of reached my breaking point. I ended up leaving school. I left. I took a job somewhere else so that I could just kind of get away from things.
Yeah.
And that really just made me realize I had gotten so low on the bottom, and I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't doing things that I wanted to do. I was doing things that other people were telling me would make me successful or make me good for others. My best friend wouldn't want me to be sad doing all this stuff for her. her mom had told me during her funeral, like, it's your turn to pass the torch. And I think I thought for a while that that torch was changing the world. But I think that torch was just living the life they would have wanted and just living joy and giving that joy to others. And I don't think I was really giving joy to others when I was so sad because I wasn't happy and I had nothing to give. So I really just focused the last few months on finding myself again and doing things that give back that also make me happy. And it's been a lot more, cancer related for me. I've been advocating and I'm studying public health.
Okay. Yeah. To wrap up though, I want to understand to a couple of audience. One is to other cancer patients who may be going through challenging situation right now. What would be some advice from you to help them get through what they're going through now?
It's so hard because I think so many places tell you, you fight, just get through it. You're so inspirational. And some days you feel like a fraud because it's like you're just sitting there terrified out of your mind, not being able to do anything. You're like, I'm not fighting. I'm not inspirational. There's nothing inspirational about this. And it's really like, you have to feel it. You have to let yourself feel bad and lean on people around you that you do have. Community was so important to me. Other cancer survivors have been really like what has gotten me through to today. The memories I have of treatment, a lot of them are really great. I would sit in the teen room all the time and like watch my favorite show. And that is a memory that I have. And I think it's about creating those good memories so that you can get through, and they don't need to be these big things that you do. They need to be small things that you do for yourself.
You're still young. Life has thrown a lot at you, but you survive and you're kind of planning for your future. You're going to school. That's, I think, for many people, especially those who are going through similar situation processes, you are looking for inspirations and wisdom that you have shared today. I want to thank you for sharing all that. And even for those of us who are not going through the exact process, but everyone had their low point and struggles or challenges in their life, and go through it and hang tough, right? And like you said, enjoy the small moment, build memory while where you are. Those are just great wisdom. I want to thank you for coming on our show. Your story is inspiring. At least it helped people to look at their life differently, maybe even living it differently. And the life throw things at you dealt with it and you live it the best you can with the things that was given to you. And now you're in remission. So I wish you the best of future, and we will love to stay in touch with you to learn more about your journey, because it doesn't end here. There's much more to go.
Yes, I am so thankful that you had me on, and I'm glad I get to share my story with the world. And I hope that people do take something from it. I really just want to emphasize, hardship is so easy to fall into, but it's joy is also really easy to find. Just being able to come on here and get to share that and get to talk about it. It was a really great experience, and I can't wait to share my future with y'all as well.
Yes. We look forward to it. And that brings us to the end of another exciting episode of Hello World. Please support our podcast by hitting the subscribe button. Also, don't forget to smash that like. Your likes will help our podcast reach more awesome people like you. Lastly, tap that notification bell to receive instant alert whenever we drop in a new episode. We can't wait to see you again on our next episode. Until then, keep on being a positive force in this world.